Jonathan Keating of Ortho Molecular Products.
Correct.
How long have you been with the company?
Yeah, so we launched in Canada in June of 2016. It's been just past 7 years.
That's a long time.
Yeah, it seems like it's flown by.
Yes.
Yeah, really quick.
And along the way, your partner in crime showed up.
Yeah, we're very excited. Leah is actually celebrating 1 year.
Today?
This week.
Close enough.
Ago.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Thank you.
Yes. How has it been? I guess you have to say it's been great.
It's been great. I'm just kidding. It genuinely has been great. I would say, I said to Jonathan today, it was the fastest year of my life.
Oh, wow.
It flew by, but I loved it. And yeah, it's been great.
I'm sorry. I'm going to mute that. So I think we can say that we're kind of coming out of COVID, but obviously it left an imprint on everybody's lives and every industry. What are some ways that the pandemic changed supplements?
Yeah, so I feel like we need to kind of like take a bit of a step back and kind of understand where we were going, which was that the supplement space was flourishing. Providers are likewise carrying items as part of their clinical dispensary, and things were moving in a good direction. I feel that the pandemic definitely shifted things. And so from the provider perspective, there was a lot of folks that were offering, virtual platforms to meet their patients. And likewise, a lot of the supplement vendors and in the supplement space, the analogy would be some of the lines kind of transitioned into the health food store space a little bit. And this created accessibility for sure. But I think during a time when the pandemic was occurring and plenty of restrictions throughout Canada and the world for sure, just like the real estate market became a focus for a lot of folks, I would say that the supplement space, nutrition, there's more exposure to social media, TV commercials, on your phone, it's pretty quick to pull stuff up as well. And I think the consumer began to gain interest in what they could do from a prevention perspective to engage with supplements and figure out what they wanted to do from a foundational approach at the very least. Some of the common terms, things like vitamin C, probiotics, fish oils, vitamin D, etc., became a focus for sure. And I think that coming out of the pandemic today, I think a lot of providers are fielding these questions as to, what is what. And if I visit a health food store space or I visit a clinician, what is the difference in the options that exist today? And what is the best thing for me to take? And how do I decipher? Because there's a lot of information and a lot of misinformation.
So you would say that it's had, in a sense, a positive impact?
I would say from an exposure perspective, it's definitely a positive scenario whereby patients are looking at their health and wellness in a different way and looking for opportunities to improve, whether it be supplements or lifestyle. I think people have realized that they can certainly accomplish a lot of things without having to leave their home. Right. So a lot of folks, you couldn't find exercise equipment, right? Everything was back ordered in a lot of scenarios, and people started to have a little home gym set up, and they can get away with having a few small things, but make use of a space that maybe previously was just, piling up laundry or something to that effect.
So since lockdowns are a thing of the past, and what you described was a lot of like self-pursuit, people like having time perhaps on their hands or being exposed to different avenues of health, or having that motivation to I need to take care of myself. I don't want to get sick, whatever. Yeah. How has that fluctuated in the last year where things are kind of what we would call back to normal?
So I think when it comes to the health space specifically, there's still, the consumer is basically trying to decipher what do I need to do and how do I best approach this? Because if you go online, do your own research, that means something different to everybody. And I think the biggest reality is that a lot of patients are realizing that, hey, it makes sense to seek a provider, seek a clinician, and help kind of uncover what is more specific to me versus a general approach that is being preached to the masses.
Just to piggyback off of what you said. If the pandemic kind of was the catalyst behind this heightened emphasis that people started placing on like their own personal health, I think that continued afterwards just the same as well.
Yeah. Okay. You don't think it's changed or evolving? It's a trick question.
I think it stayed heightened for sure.
Okay. I mean, it's interesting. Can we translate to that, like in general terms, to sales, maybe across the board, nutraceuticals, beginning of pandemic, pre-pandemic, now? Is there a trend? Is there an increase? Is it the same?
It's definitely an increase.
Okay.
Hands down.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Across full spectrum, any type of supplement?
Full spectrum.
Oh, wow.
That would be the scenario.
Okay. And
yeah.
And is just predicated on what you just described? Just like people are just more curious and or proactive about their health?
I think there's probably a few things at play. The pandemic issues, concerns, people are more exposed to different things, doing their own research, trying to figure out where things stand and what can benefit them the most. I think the second part of what's going on in part of Canada is the sense that, we have basically free healthcare for the most part. And patients today are maybe reconsidering the fact that, hey, if I go see my GP, I get 15, 20 minutes to have my say. And maybe I come back 3 months later, 6 months later, my annual checkup, and I'm dealing with a lot of the same things. Maybe they've worsened. And so the thought process is, hey, maybe I could benefit from having a conversation with a provider that's going to maybe give me a little bit more time, help me unpack more about what's going on with me, take into account a little bit more of the family history side of things, maybe do some additional testing that is not offered through my, my general physician. And I think that's certainly one avenue that patients have really kind of dipped their toes in the water in a sense.
Sure.
And that seems to be coming up more and more common.
Well, I want to grab that point and run with it, because the feedback I'm getting from my patients is they're not getting 15 or 20 minutes with their GP. Maybe not even in a year do they have that much time spread over a couple appointments.
Yeah.
And I'm not bashing the GPs. I think they have their own obstacles, whatever those may be. And then I think there is an insight into like, yeah, our healthcare is free, but translate that to any other sphere or profession or product, anything that's free. Sometimes you got to scratch your head and be like, is this the best that's out there?
Yeah, for sure.
So maybe people want to see where else that they can pick up the slack.
Yeah, I think, there's a couple of things that are important to me and Leah as well that I know for sure. And that is, if you're going to invest in something in life, health should be a priority. I have 2 kids now, and I'm paying way more attention to what they consume and what they do even than I do at times, which is probably a fault of my own. But I do think the GP challenge is no fault of the providers. It's just there's not as many GPs to go around anymore as well.
Why?
And so if you're getting, first and foremost, if you're getting limited time, in Canada, there are some people that can't get a medical doctor as their primary care. And in a lot of cases, it's a nurse practitioner or something else.
And that might be a step up, to be honest.
And that's creating more exposure into the space of lifestyle, diet, functional integrative medicine.
Because they are already naturally inclined.
Exactly.
Yeah. Good point.
Yeah.
What do you say, Leah? Because you're newer to the company, and I'm not sure about your previous experience, but how's your view about like healthcare and like being proactive in terms of whether it's supplementation or diet or exercise? What has changed for you, or what has come to your mind being in the profession you are in now?
I think that this role kind of came naturally to me, so to say. I saw a naturopath my entire life, so it's not a new space for me to be, diving into. But I think specifically what you're talking about is I think people had a lot of time on their hands, and like a lot of industries shifted to like the online space while we were all, during lockdown.
Sure.
And I don't think that the nutraceutical industry was any different than that. And I think that just having so much time and everyone getting online, we started researching ourselves and taking, like you said, a proactive approach to our own health. And I think we saw that kind of created what's happening now.
Sure. So an idea that came to me while you guys were talking was, the idea that a lot of people had time on their hands, and the peak of the pandemic, there's a fear component. How much of that do you think is going to wane in the coming years, where hopefully there is no other pandemic, even though there's always the next boogeyman being threatened around the corner, and with people going back to their normal lives, maybe not to the same extent? I mean, how much of this is a flash in the pan where people are going to start getting a little bit soft and lazy? Or do you think that it's going to be like a permanent change for a lot of people where they actually become health conscious?
Well, I hope that a lot of that now isn't driven by fear. I think that maybe people have seen positive results come from taking, more awareness of their own health, and we will see that play out, but not based on fear, hopefully.
Yeah. So it's like the proof is in the pudding, where someone just feels better and that's self-motivating on its own.
I would hope so, yeah. And I would say that also there was maybe a shift towards things of quality and evidence-based. And so once, everyone not everyone, a lot of people got involved in it, then I think they start to see positive changes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thoughts?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's one thing that you mentioned was like evidence-based, because that kind of translates to another one of the topics I wanted to jump into was supplements and naturopathic care, when discussed with other practitioners, often is pushed to the side. A lot of the old responses were like, that stuff's not real. There's no proof of this working. Those supplements, you're just creating expensive urine. There's a lot of like negativity, a lot of prejudice. So where do you see that changing? We mentioned like nurse practitioners and maybe newer MDs are adopting a little bit more of a health conscious approach, or have some more experience. Like maybe they themselves have seen a naturopath. I've had MDs come to me as patients, which is always an interesting experience. A lot of what they know, their training, kind of becomes like a little bit of a shell of how they wrap my discussion and my recommendations. They'll kind of turn what I'm saying into more of a medical diagnosis and a genetic disposition, whereas I'm shifting more towards, hey, this might be your lifestyle, as opposed to you're just destined to suffer this. Jonathan?
Yeah. So I would say there's a perfect scenario and a perfect world where you have the best of both. And I think the classic medical model is very much, treating the chronic scenarios that in a lot of cases, they're tough to reverse or irreversible altogether. And I think the approach with functional integrative medicine and when it comes to naturopathic providers is that the focus isn't necessarily supplements. I mean, that's part of a solution for sure, but the focus really is being more upstream in the approach. And how do we focus on someone today and prevent them from 20 years from now dealing with a chronic condition? So part of that is lifestyle, is diet, is nutrition, is good rest, good sleep, avoiding stress. And a lot of these things go hand in hand. You can't measure them necessarily today for what they are, but you factor that into a more all-encompassing lifestyle scenario for folks, with supplements being part of that adjunct that can help maybe move the needle a little bit to start as patients hone in, have some small successes, and then really engage with the lifestyle side of things is really foundationally what we should be doing all the time. And I would say there's always going to be a subset of patients that are used to what exists today, and they're just looking for the one pill or the one pharmacotherapy that can solve what that issue is today or work to alleviate some of the things that they're dealing with. But the bigger challenge is that creates a kinetic chain, as you know, of things that occur, and then all of a sudden we're affecting 15, 20 other things simultaneously, and they could be in a worse position later. So I think that for a lot of people to understand that the functional integrative medicine approach and through the naturopathic providers is meant to instill values and daily routines, positive habits that if you do correctly and consistently can change the game for your health, promote longevity, and prevent a lot of these scenarios that are deemed hereditary from fully coming to fruition, or from being expedited and happening sooner than later from a previous generation.
So do you find that will support or at times contradict this science-based or evidence-based mentality where we have a medical system that overrides most care that is purely like textbook medicine, as opposed to what we're describing is like a lifestyle, a philosophy change, like kind of like a bigger picture, investigating everything, like looking what you eat, like food. Don't presume food is good for you.
Yeah.
So does it support it? Can it contradict it?
So I feel like this is where we're going in the sense of the two can be intertwined as one.
Sure.
And I think for patients today, I can think of a few clinics where there is a medical doctor and a naturopath working collaboratively. The patients who are used to the classical model feel safe knowing they have an MD on hand to validate their concerns. And also the naturopath, for instance, is able to provide a bit of a nuance to other things that we can be doing. And the MD is also validating some of those insights to the overall picture.
In those cases, is the ND a little bit more medical in their vibe, or is the MD a little bit more naturally inclined?
More naturally inclined, for sure.
Okay. All right.
So that's why I think it's there's some good examples of this that are occurring today throughout Canada. And I would say that this is something that I think in medicine for Canada, this is something that we should be kind of striving for. Because
do you think that model would work in most clinic settings?
I think it's what patients need.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
Well, they need their medical
to,
doctor. I mean,
exactly.
I think that's a must.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, it sounds kind of callous, but like you need prescriptions and you need referrals. Yeah. But is the system itself changing? Like we're seeing a shift away from that GP that is sort of like the overseer, and now they're sort of becoming a middleman.
Yeah. And I think that's in seeing some of those things that I think this is where it's going, where it'll be more of a collaborative approach.
Okay.
And I think that providers will be striving to create these scenarios because one, patients are going to feel safe. They're going to feel like they still get the same standard of care, and it's going to be enhanced by the fact that they have a few more things to consider as part of what they're doing. You're seeing it in younger generations who are, coming to life with this philosophy that, hey, lifestyle plays a huge role in what I do. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the baby boomer group, it's kind of still a little bit more of the old process. And, as getting my dad to see a naturopath at, over 60 years of age now was something that was a big project for me to have him do and actually go through it and witness what the difference is between visiting his GP and then having this like whole other approach that at times costs people almost nothing to change a habit. What does that cost you? To implement 30 minutes of exercise every other day, what does that cost you? Right? To focus on good sleep, to consider things like meditation, take up yoga, do some of these other things that can help alleviate, the whole person, the whole body.
At the same time, as much as I value that, I feel like we flip roles a little bit, but I'm like, I think the supplements have to be there. And I that's where I'm kind of curious about what you think the future of supplementation is. There's a few topics there. There's there's that bill and that kind of nonsense that's going on right now.
For sure.
Then there's just like the idea of and I've complained about this a lot, is like there's no innovation in supplements in Canada. It's foreign driven, south of the border or anywhere else.
Sure.
No one's coming up with new stuff, which is sad.
I probably wouldn't say that's the case.
Not completely.
I would say the bigger challenge is things that are new and innovative aren't always approved for Canada.
Sure. Okay.
And so there are limitations in the natural product space for what is allowed in country, what Health Canada will and will not approve. And at times, although things may seem relatively simple and not all that complex, for a number of reasons, they're just not allowed into country.
Yeah.
And so that prevents the innovation, because the innovation I think is there. And in other countries around the world, there's different ways to do things. There's new product offerings. There's new things to uncover medically, and then less solutions as well. But there is a bit of a stalling out in Canada specifically because a lot of these nuances aren't proven necessarily today. The research hasn't caught up necessarily. It is starting to come. And then there's just some restrictions on specific raw materials that are not allowed in Canada unless you do certain things to allow that. Certain thresholds. You're familiar with vitamin D. That just shifted not too long ago from 1,000 IU to 2,500 IU. And, that's not necessarily the threshold that providers are leveraging that nutrient clinically.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's well above that. So that's a very basic example of, would you say vitamin D is innovative and is growing and is...
Its creation isn't, or its presence isn't, but perhaps its different uses or applications can be innovative.
For sure. And then certain thresholds would then correlate to
Right.
what those uses would be.
Yeah.
So if you
So
don't
1,000
achieve-
a day just won't cut it.
then, I think that's the bigger issue when it comes to what you're seeing in terms of a lack of innovation in terms of natural products in country versus the rest of the world.
So we had a time when vitamin D was free to be assessed through your GP. This was years ago. And because there was, I guess, sufficient evidence to Health Canada to allow or at least recommend through OHIP that it be covered and be assessed properly. That's gone. I mean, gone as far as like now you have to pay, which then kind of pushes back to like my naturopath can just easily do that and recommend an appropriate dose and other things to go along with it.
For sure.
As opposed to like just a token, just eat some yogurt and take some vitamin D, which is sort of some MD's level. That's their training or their whatever they're comfortable with. Leah, I want to know, in your circle, how has your discussion of supplements impacted the people around you? Have they
Just in general?
No, be very specific. I want to know names. No, like, are you the supplement girl? Are you labeled that, or are you actually like saying like, did you know this? Like you're becoming like a know-it-all.
Yeah, at family gatherings and get-togethers with friends, it's like, okay, Leah, what do I need to be taking? And I'm like, that's not exactly how it works. But no, I liked how you brought up earlier the kind of like the myths, because I feel like in, a circle such as mine outside of work, these myths are quite common. And I think the only way to debunk them per se would be to like bring them out in the open and talk about them. So for example, you brought up, are vitamins real, right? That's something that I would commonly hear.
Yes. So one, like would someone, like, is it a genuine question or is it more like a snide remark? Like, what are you selling? What are you into now?
I think it could be both, but I hope that it's genuine. I think it's genuine. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember I had a patient. She walked into my office. She goes, "Do you believe in this stuff?" I'm like, "Sit down.
Let me explain."
Yeah. What is this? Yeah. And so how do you respond? Like, how do you respond without like punching?
Yeah, I think that it's a great question. I would like to think that, in there's a point of view that most of our nutrition should be consumed in food, which is not untrue. I think in a lot of cases it is, but there are specifics and certain circumstances where that isn't the case.
Let's
and
talk
in those
about
cases,
those.
Yeah, in those cases, it's super important that somebody has a practitioner such as yourself that can help them through that and also identify what they are. Because, like, for example, and they ask me, what do I need to take? I can't determine that. I don't know what that is.
Yeah, but you can kind of give them a hint.
Maybe.
Just take some of this. But so there's a couple things there. Like one, that our diet, our foods have more than sufficient vitamins and whatnot. Well, that's not true, is it? Because one, how do you know what that person's eating?
Yeah.
Does the average person know what a balanced diet is? And even if they know what it is, are they consuming it? Yeah, and if they are consuming it, do they have the machinery to digest it?
Probably not.
Probably not.
No.
Because most people don't have a clue.
No.
What do you know about nutrition? Like grade school up to the end of high school. What have you learned about nutrition at that point?
The food pyramid and the food groups.
Yes, and maybe before you were in grade school, but when I was in grade school, the food guide looked really different than it does now.
I think even today
it's changed.
It changed again. Guess why? Because no one knows what they're doing. It's not because there's no new research. It's because there's a philosophy change and probably some sponsoring. That's all. Okay. And then
I think it's just then identifying what are you missing from, when you're consuming food.
What do you think most people are missing?
Oh my goodness. Most people, I don't know.
To me, protein.
Okay.
Just like it's a broad food group, food
I
component.
would agree with that.
I think most people way overindulge on carbs.
Yep.
And barely get protein. And even those who eat protein, if they're stressed out, they don't produce stomach acid, which means they don't absorb that or assimilate that protein to the degree that they should. And if they have low stomach acid, they're probably low in iron and B12, especially if they're female. So now we got these people who they're anemic and they have poor circulation and low muscle mass.
Yeah.
And they're hungry. So they resort to more carbs because it's easier to digest. Now we have an obesity problem, a blood sugar problem, hormonal imbalances. Just because someone's lacking a little bit of protein, lacking the awareness to know that they need to have a protein source at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then you've got people promoting intermittent fasting, which for some people might be great, and in other people it's probably the kryptonite. I don't know.
It's a lot of information, and to your point, a lot of information that's hard to digest.
Touche.
Also, it's very different patient to patient. As per your point, it's a kinetic chain that is unique to you.
Yep.
You know, most of my patients fall into about 75%. They're all got the same problem.
Okay.
What is the problem?
Low stomach acid, adrenal exhaustion, blood sugar dysregulation. As like those three things that overlap, you got so many different symptomologies that are sort of constellation and related, but manifest differently.
Is this correlating to coming out of a pandemic?
No, I think this was before.
Okay.
I think it's like it's supersede because I'm not even dealing with immunity. Even though if you increase your protein and you reduce your adrenal fatigue, your immune system's better, and you heal your gut, your immune system's better. So a lot of the direction I've gone has gone away from the specific nutrients and a little bit more to like organ function, like the bigger picture.
Sure.
So maybe acting as like an intermediary between food as medicine and then like supplementation and deficiencies. Because like if I feel like, yeah, I can give you like 10 different supplements to fill all those deficiencies that you have, because we can test for that or we can assess for it.
Yep.
But then, yeah, maybe food is supposed to be your medicine. And the goal is that you should have a balanced diet. So if you can't digest with the supplements and you can't digest the food, like what's the missing piece? Like, it's like, let me help you support your stomach, your gastric juices, your enzymes. And there's already a benefit with symptoms because a lot of people, they're already coming in bloated, but bloating is like a secondary symptom. They come in, I'm exhausted or I have constipation.
Yeah.
But yeah, the bloating's there. Get rid of the bloating, and now the constipation's gone, and now the energy's back. So I think that when naturopaths get painted as like these pill pushers, I mean, I think in some cases, someone who lacks some experience may resort to supplements, but there's got to be like a fundamental understanding of like, what's the missing piece? Because maybe naturopaths and MDs are so different because even though they all give pills, they all kind of blame like a bigger issue.
Sure.
The MDs may say, well, this is your genetics. This is like, it's destined to happen. You're fine today. You might die tomorrow. Naturopaths are like, well, you have these fundamental issues. You have all these deficiencies, but these supplements will replenish that. So it's kind of like a bucket with a hole, and you just keep filling pills to fill the hole, but then it just keeps pouring out.
Yeah.
I guess my idea is like, let's understand the big picture of like what is our body doing? Maybe I'm looking at understanding and teaching, educating younger people about what their body is supposed to do, what is supposed to be normal. A lot of people, they find that it's like, that's just how I am. I've always been constipated. I've always had eczema. I've always had dandruff. It's like, you don't have to. I don't know.
It's like the new norm curse. It just becomes part of your day, your routine. It's what's going on, and you justify it that way. But I think for the naturopathic doctor community, supplements are part of a bigger plan in the sense that that's not all you're doing. I'm sure you're not leaving a patient after a conversation and saying, here's your supplement regimen, and then we're going to see just what this does over the next X amount of time. And I don't think that the GPs are spending as much time with like, hey, what else is really going on? It's like we have enough time to get through what this one thing is. We'll address that. And then if we need to schedule a follow-up, we'll talk about that next one thing. Whereas I can imagine that someone like yourself is saying, hey, here's the issue. Let's work upstream. Here's what you need from a nutrient perspective. Here's how you can change some of your diet and what you're currently doing to help this work better. And then here are the things you need to embrace as part of your lifestyle so that we're not having this become your new norm where you have all these things happening all the time. You haven't gone to the bathroom today, tomorrow, the next day. And that's just, you're used to going every 5 days. That's obviously not the norm. But maybe if you engage with exercise, maybe if you engage with reducing some stress, doing a few other lifestyle habits that again don't cost very much, improve your sleep cycle, you know, you can accomplish some other things and move towards more of a foundational approach from a nutrient perspective. And I think that there is an end game for patients that come out of visiting with a naturopathic provider as to, this is what we can do, but this is what you also need to do. And that accountability factor is, I think, what's missing in the classic model when it comes to MDs and GPs.
That's fair. That's fair. When you look at society and you see that we have like a very satisfaction-driven world where I want instant gratification, how much of this lifestyle stuff kind of just is counterintuitive?
A lot of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you say?
No, I think that is probably the whole point, but I don't think you or I would say that is like the end game of this, right? Where nobody's saying that, you know, they're not coming to see you and leaving with a protocol that they're supposed to be on indefinitely. And I would say that in some cases there are stuff that has an immediate effect, but you're right, in a lot of cases there is not.
Well, I like that because I do tell people, and historically people will come in like, I've never been to a naturopath, but I know that you guys do stuff differently and it takes longer. That's kind of like a general comment that I just hear. Just because I guess they feel like maybe supplements are not as strong and they take longer to build up. But what I tell patients is like the recommendations, both dietary, lifestyle, and supplementation wise, they have immediate impact. If I'm suggesting that you have systemic inflammation, there's no pill that makes it go away today.
Right.
I mean, someone could be on prednisone and in a few days feel better with whatever severe condition they have. But I mean, that's sort of like an extreme case. The idea is like, no, you're going to feel better this week. At least start to feel better. You may even feel better than you expect. You may even feel better than you ever have in years because what you've gotten used to has just progressively gotten worse and worse.
Yeah.
Yeah. But sometimes people just don't know that.
Well, I think the point to be made is that whether or not it's immediate or not, it is not an indefinite solution. It's not they're coming to see you and they're leaving with this protocol and you may or may not see them in a year from now. That's not what's happening. So at least they can leave with the confidence that, you know, they have a solution until you see them next. And at that time, it is reevaluated and it's not meant to be on forever.
Yeah, and there is an indefinite nature to health where it's like, I can give you a diet and you'll follow it and you'll feel better. If in 6 months you just go back to how you were eating before, it's very likely that you'll start feeling poorly again because there's probably something in there that just doesn't agree with you, well, food sensitivities or allergies or whatnot. Now, there's an element to like the gut healing and gut repair and digestive support that would be like, okay, in the meantime, you're avoiding gluten, for example.
Right.
And then maybe in 6 months, you can have it occasionally and it won't bother you.
Right.
But if you're going to have gluten every day and you're just going to go back to your habits,
Yeah.
forget the carbs and the starch issue. Gluten's just difficult to digest in North America. That's just how it is. I didn't make gluten.
Are you sure?
I didn't.
You're not taking credit?
No, I don't want that. But I tell people, if you're in like, you go to Italy or Europe, for example, eat whatever you want. You'll get away with it. It's fine. And they're amazed and they do it. And then they come back and then they're like, I got cocky and I tried to order a pizza here. And now I'm at not necessarily square one, but you know, they revisit what they were suffering. So there's a component of like patient compliance, and they do want accountability, but they have to be self-motivated. They have to want to change something. There's
100%.
there's no way that you're going to just be like, well, I see naturopath and I don't know, he told me to do stuff and I don't know. You have to want to.
What is it? 21 days to build a habit?
I don't believe in that.
Oh, well then.
No, I believe it. I believe it. Go. You can tell me more. But is it like? So doesn't that kind of like? No, I'm not picking on you, but like, doesn't that undermine the whole idea? It's like it's almost like I'm trying to trick them into like believing something. Well, how do we get people to just believe that health is like a motivator, like just wanting to be healthy, just wanting to do better?
So I think there's a couple things that play in. To pick up what we kind of mentioned a bit earlier, I think to your point, in a lot of cases, patients need to kind of hit rock bottom.
Yeah.
And they really need to go to a place where it's just like, I'm super desperate for help in a very different way. And I've done the same things for my whole life. I'm 40, I'm 50, I'm 60, I'm 70 years old today. And I haven't gotten better with whatever my current normal is. And, you know, if you think about it, it's basically, you're never getting to where you want to be. And so in those scenarios, those patients, and you've probably seen them, they're like, I will do what I need to do. I will stick to what I need to stick with. And it's a reminder of, I don't want to be where I was. And also the fact that because it took you so long to get to this point, 40, 50, 60 years, whatever it is, it's going to take some time to work against that and reestablish a lot of the things that were foundational that we have, you know, when we grow up as kids, and all the things that we can easily do, which seem simple, but because we're not exposed to the things we are later in life, it becomes much more challenging. I would say the second part of that is, again, in Canada, not having access to a GP for everybody, is you might have more exposure with a different primary care provider that you've had for a longer amount of time and has guided you through this. And so, like, for example, how many of your patients do you see that go back to their GP and then it's misinformation back and forth, right? Does that kind of take away from what they've learned from seeing you and the things that you're trying to implement and suggest?
Yeah, it does. A lot of the times, and I think more contemporarily, people don't really go back to their GP. Or, so there's scenario one where it's like, I'm not telling my GP I'm coming to see you because he's going to get mad at me, which
means they're going back to their GP.
I mean, I don't not want them to.
Of course.
And I do want them to be transparent and honest, because I'm not doing anything that is countering their GP's agenda.
Yeah.
Which their agenda is to help the patient.
Of course.
But sometimes there's just like this pushback where it's like, why are you seeing someone else? Why are you taking that stuff? That stuff doesn't do anything, which is unfair and ignorant, but it happens.
Those are the scenarios I'm referring to, right?
Yeah. And well, the patients are more so now, they have a distaste for their doctor. So they're like, he's not helping me. So I'm going to come and whatever you tell me, I've already looked up. I've already done my research. I just need someone like you to kind of green light it, be like, okay, I'm not hurting myself.
Yeah.
Which I appreciate because at least they're self-motivated.
Yeah. And they're seeking advice versus just following along with
or
Dr.
just
Google.
going to, I mean, the other scenario was not necessarily MDs countering my discussion or my recommendations. It's other healthcare, like natural practitioners, whether they're self-taught or a weekend course. Worst case is another naturopath stepping on my recommendation. That doesn't really happen, to be quite honest, but that would be worst.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it's inevitable too. Like, I mean, and in some sense it can happen. I've had a lot of patients that seen other naturopaths, which is kind of like, well, then what happened? Did they not help you? Were they inexperienced? Or was it like something that they were recommending just not jiving with what the patient's personal philosophy was? So sometimes like I'll be like, this other practitioner, they did something good. Like I'm not negating. I look at things differently. So you can continue what they recommended, but I'm going to give you this. Maybe it'll help that work better.
Sometimes it could be as simple as just a personality clash.
Yeah.
Can be.
That could be a real thing. But I would say, if you're someone who's hit rock bottom, if you're someone who has had more frequent exposure to a provider in the functional integrative space, then that kind of becomes your new norm. and you're in it, maybe you're a little bit more consistent with it because that's kind of your driving force. That's what you're more exposed to. That's what you're seeing more often. And that's the advice you're seeking and getting. And it's kind of reinstilling that in the patient, right? The more frequency, the more touch points, the more engaged they will be, the more positive shifts they see, the more they're willing to do on their end. And then there was a third piece to it, but I'm forgetting.
That's okay.
Yeah.
You did, those first two were awesome.
Thanks.
Okay, so now where do we go? Where are supplements going?
So I would say in Canada, there's likely going to be a shift in the next year or two with regards to supplements. And I do think for some vendors in the space, for some organizations, it'll be probably some challenging times. And for others, it'll probably be a really good thing. And so what I think will basically occur is that you'll see a bit of a refinement of the natural products that exist today in Canada. And I don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing, because today, if you are an average person and you walk into a health food store and you need vitamin C, you have how many options?
Too many.
And how do you know what you want to take or what dose is
they're all
best
the
for
same,
you?
and give me the cheapest.
And the different marketing, and then you have price points. So I think there's a bit of a redundancy in this space, and to your point, a lack of innovation at times, where sometimes a supplement line will just produce something that somebody else has and have a label on it that appears maybe that's more of a better look, and the patient's more inclined to do that. So I think there'll be some cost things that occur that will be experienced through different vendors for sure, and it'll promote, to your point, innovation in, if you're going to spend the time, money, resources to create a formula, you're going to want that to be impactful. And you're going to look to do something different than something that's already been done, or you're going to look to make something more comprehensive, so you can turn 2 or 3 products into one, if that's a fit, and improve patient compliance, because now it's one thing you have to reference. And that's not a fit for every patient, and I know that. You have to do certain things at certain times. Every patient's going to be different, but if there are some general offerings that patients are usually taking, and you can kind of save them some money at times while also giving them less to monitor on a daily basis, because as you know, taking supplements isn't as simple as do your routine in the morning. It can be 3 times a day. It can be twice a day, morning and night, morning, noon and night, with meals, without meals, right? So there's a lot to track.
Yeah.
And that creates some of the challenges for patients, in that, hey, I really want to do this, but I've done this for a week and it's taking me a lot of time. I got kids, I got other stuff, I have a job, I have things to do, and I can't just set alarms 10 times a day to remind myself to take my supplements. To Leah's point, it does take time to kind of get those habits going, and doing it repetitively is what's going to keep it, in a good position long term. But I do think you'll see in this space that the changes that are likely coming through Canada will likely spark innovation, alleviate some of the redundancy, and help refine decision-making processes for patients and for providers alike.
Very good.
Yeah.
That's a very positive twist on things.
Yeah.
Do you think that's the motivation of why this bill is coming through?
I don't want to comment too much on that. I think there's a few factors at play for sure. But I do think if you think of the average consumer, the person that's never seen a naturopath, or just, following Dr. Google, and they're going to a health food store because they're curious, it'll make things a little bit more simple.
Do you think health food stores, maybe it's a bad question, but I'm going to ask it anyways. Do you think they should be more regulated? Regulated in terms of, these are things that are accessible to anyone, can purchase.
For sure.
And a lot of times, I guess, from the medical sphere, they're like, well, how do you know that's safe for you? How do you know it's good for you? How do you know how much to take?
Yeah.
I mean, it's easy for me to say, we'll just go see a naturopath and they'll kind of give you the rubber stamp, right? But
well, I think there's 2 things at play there. One is, if you are making a recommendation to a patient and they leave your clinic with that recommendation and they happen to be shopping elsewhere and can find it there too, what's the value from your end if they can just go get it on their own indefinitely? Who's guiding them on if they need to take that long term? If it's a short term approach, you're tracking their blood work and those kinds of things, and doing testing, of course. But if they can make their own decision at that point, then how is it really impacting the process?
sure.
And so I guess the question is really, who's responsible for this side of things? And I would say that vendors should have their own accountability. And the supplement lines that work directly with providers exclusively in that capacity and avoid the health food store space, I think they're creating that value add for providers in the sense that, hey, you should be talking to a patient should be talking to a clinician before engaging in any of those things, because interactions and where you come from, it's very different patient to patient, and what they're dealing with, pharmacotherapy, and what their course of antibiotics. How many times have you taken an antibiotic in your life? Do you know?
Maybe 3 or 4 times.
And you're probably someone that should know, and you don't know the exact answer. So imagine a patient who is like, I don't know, my dentist, my doctor, my eye doctor, I don't even know what I'm taking anymore. I've done it so many times.
Sure.
Right? So I think that the ownership should be on supplement lines to work against this and work with providers exclusively, because they are the ones that should be making recommendations.
Yeah. So, I mean, for providers, like supplement providers, on their labels, it usually says like, don't continue for past 3 months or 6 weeks without seeing a practitioner. You're laughing.
Yeah.
I mean, at least it's there.
Have you seen a cigarette pack recently?
Yeah, I guess so. So you're suggesting it doesn't make a difference?
I mean,
it's just
does everybody read fine print today in a world where instantaneous, results are the goal?
I do get enough people calling me like, I've been on it for 7 weeks. Is that bad? I'm like,
okay.
I'm telling you it's okay. So
well, that's probably a good thing.
Sure.
Right?
I mean, it's a
people
rarity.
are paying attention.
Yeah.
But I would think in general, people kind of look past that. And if they feel like, hey, I've been taking this long enough, I've noticed an improvement in how I feel, that I'm just going to kind of keep doing my thing. It's available in a health food store. What harm could it really do to me if I can just get it on my own accord? I don't need the advice of a provider to tell me that I should or shouldn't be on this.
Yeah.
I think that's, is information, but kind of creates misinformation, and it can be perceived as, if I can access this on my own, then I can decide how often and when I need to take it or stop.
Is there any kind of pulling away from something you had mentioned in terms of innovation and kind of combining and making it more of a proprietary blend moving forward? Could that be something? I guess I'm dovetailing the idea of there's medications, there's the name brand, and then there's the generic.
Sure.
Would that make sense in terms of natural health products? Because there's so many different glutamines.
For sure.
But then there's maybe a formula that's more of a GI healing that has glutamine and other things.
Yeah. I think I would say that the focus for clinicians in terms of achieving patient outcomes is going to be therapeutic dosing. And if you're changing something to have less therapeutic dosing or less of a therapeutic effect, then is it really going to benefit the patient? Okay. And I think that is a bit of a challenge when it comes to natural products, is that if you change something so much that it's 10% of what it once was, that means you can expect 10% of the original outcome.
Theoretically. So I guess you're saying if I'm combining 10 different products as opposed to 10 separate bottles. Now you got glutamine and aloe vera and
for sure.
And you're kind of inferencing that it's you can only fit 10% of each to make the whole. So does that have only 10% of the therapeutic effect individually, or could they have a summative effect? And this is a big question.
It's a big question, but I would say, if therapeutic dose of glutamine is 4 grams or more, and you have 500 milligrams, what should your patient expect?
It's hard to say. It depends on what else it's combined with.
What level of outcome,
you'd have to study that.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of moving parts for sure. But I think in general, if you're going to be a line that is for providers exclusively, you should probably do that. And if you're going to be in the retail space, then you should probably do that. I think the confusing part is when a natural product line is doing both. Because then the patients, again, they can go on their own accord and do their thing and find the same things elsewhere. Sure. And they may not come back, and they probably should, because you can tell them more about what's going on, what you're seeing on the clinical side when you're doing testing, and what you're trying to move them towards, versus what they've decided that Dr. Google is now taking over and going to reference and make decisions the rest of the way.
Yeah, I want to know more about your friends that give you a hard time about supplements. They ever ask you silly questions do you believe you have parasites and stuff like that?
Of course.
Yeah?
Yeah.
What do you say?
If they ask me, do I think I have a parasite?
Yeah.
I think I would say I don't think so.
But how do you know?
I guess I don't.
See,
Yeah.
now we have to start digging.
Yeah.
No, I guess I say parasites because, like, when I say research, it's not really research. If it's, well, I mean, technically it is. Like, I go on TikTok a lot. I don't know if that's scary as a practitioner.
It's a good platform.
It really is. There's a lot of good information. I've met some interesting people, like interesting people that are smart. Maybe they're eccentric.
Okay.
But you know what? Like, there is an element, like, so there's the evidence-based. And then, so like in like, I think when we did our, what's it called? Our graduation, we did the oath. So naturopathic medicine is based on the art and science. So I guess what I want to highlight is, like, I feel like we still need the art component to this. And the art is like, sometimes it's based on like intuition.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just kind of like, I know I should give you this, but for some reason I just want to give you that. I'm going to give you the opposite of what I think because I don't know. I just feel like that. Am I weird for believing it?
I don't think so.
I
think that's why my answer initially would be no, because I feel that intuition, so to say.
Okay.
And that I don't have a parasite.
I'm not implying you do.
No.
I didn't think you did. I mean, I'm just using it as a general.
I would say for
Sorry.
anybody who's done something for a very long time,
Yeah.
right? Like you're
gonna science this up. I can tell.
No,
I
it's
know.
not science
I
at
know
all.
you by now.
I think intuition is a real thing, and if you've done something long enough, you probably have good perspective on time and place that maybe
but
something
that is
is
not
or isn't
intuition.
happening.
That's experience and a kind of like an influence.
I can support your intuition at times.
Do you believe in intuition, like in general?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why? You didn't think I was going to ask you
Deep
that
question.
question.
No,
Better
I
than
think,
the parasite question.
I think there's always a time when we have to rely on our intuition. If we can't get a solid answer. I mean, I would like to not. I like facts, just as much as the next person, but I think we can't always get facts.
Have facts ever failed us?
Of course.
All right. Well, so much for facts. You guys don't like intuition questions. Ask you more of the parasite questions.
Do you believe in intuition?
Obviously, I just said I did.
Yeah, then.
I do. I mean, sometimes too much. I don't know if that's true.
And what's the end result when you follow your intuition?
I mean, the truth is, like, if you follow your intuition and you're right more often than not, you start getting confidence and trusting your gut, and maybe the textbook doesn't fit as much as it would like to, and you start seeing little flaws and cracks in the armor. Because to me, like, let's leverage this. Like, food is like intuition. Like, you're eating, you don't know how much vitamin C's in an orange.
Right.
And maybe it's a lot less than that capsule. But maybe that orange is doing other things synergistically. It's got other elements and stuff and maybe because it's just made, it's natural and organic. Maybe there is something to it. Maybe that's why we do want to have a diet that's like the pinnacle of health, like working our way up to knowing what food is supposed to be. And maybe even part of it's like working towards like having a garden, maybe growing your own food or picking your own food at least. But then supplements can be that a surety that's like, okay, I know what's here. I know I really need this for now. Let me just rely on this until. And I guess maybe where naturopaths come in, and what I'd like to see at my bias is that I'd love for naturopaths to be a little bit more goal-oriented with, what do I want to fix in this person? Like, because the person always comes in with it's a symptom.
Yeah.
I call it like the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
They're coming in, it's like, I have eczema. But if I'm going to give you supplements to treat eczema, am I fixing the cause of the eczema? Or am I just making the eczema invisible?
It's a Band-Aid.
It's a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes there's stuff that we
necessary at times, for sure.
Yes, because some people come in and they're like burnt. They look like a burn victim, and it's terrible, and they need relief by all means. So a lot of times I'll be like, "What did your dermatologist recommend?" They're like, "They just I'm like, use it for a week, but allow the stuff I'm giving you to work in the background.
Yeah.
So that when this week passes and your skin's calmed right down, if you do something or ingest something that acts as a trigger, you're not going to full blown overreact anymore.
Yeah.
It'll kind of suppress and put out some of that fire.
But there should be steps in the process. Is probably what
There
you're saying.
has to be.
Yeah.
I think that's where it gets a little confusing, because we take pharmaceutical medicine. It's like, you have this, you take that.
Exactly.
And if that doesn't work, well, then you do that.
Yeah.
But we'll deal with that in 6 months.
Yeah.
Naturopathic stuff, it's like, you like open your dispensary and there's 1,000 bottles staring at you. And you're like, I don't know. There's no real text. I mean, there's textbooks, but some random person wrote that. How do they know what was right?
Yeah.
If we're doing customized, individualized testing and assessment, you're going to use intuition.
Sure.
And that was my thesis on intuition in naturopathic medicine.
No, I think it's important to break it down and have steps in terms of a process for patients, right? Like, you need to know what you're starting with today, what you need to focus on as a priority, and then what the big picture is. That's kind of the, this is the tip of the iceberg, basically, like eczema, allergies, skin conditions and so on. That's the tip of the iceberg, but that's what you're seeing. That's what's expressed. So if you can get that under control, great. And then what's the next layer you need to attack for, ensuring that doesn't come back? Well, yeah.
So, I mean, that's, well, maybe we'll end with that, this idea of stress. Is stress just a catchphrase for, like, I don't know, everything is stress?
So it's interesting. I don't know if this is off topic or not, but I was somewhere yesterday and I overheard someone speaking about the fact that his colleague is a guidance counselor in high school. And he said that every patient that walks in the door is talking about suicide. Mm-hmm. And this is like high school kids. And for me, I don't know, when I was in high school, was the last thing I was thinking about. There's so many other things going on that wasn't top of mind, but I don't know what the underlying cause is. I mean, there's a number of things that we can point to. Perhaps it's something in the social media space. I'm not saying that's what it is. Perhaps it's pandemic factors.
Let's go back to TikTok because, any social media platform that is feeding you media. Because, that's what TikTok does. It's monitoring your interests.
Yeah.
So someone's depressed and they see someone talking about being depressed and they're giving a little bit extra attention as opposed to other videos that they're just swiping across. You're going to get a bunch of other people talking about suicide. Sometimes it's just sufficient for someone to bring up the topic. And then it's like contagious. It's a group think. And sometimes there is a bit of like I have this weird concept of like hit by a bus syndrome, where it's like sometimes people wish they got hit by a bus, not to die, but to like just get attention and care. Like it's
take a break.
Kind of. Yeah. And that sounds very cynical, but sometimes people's like, I don't know what I need. Like, but if I got hit by a bus and didn't die, God forbid, a horrible thing to think about. But some people, they like, that's sort of like,
it's Groundhog Day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you mean Groundhog Day?
Well, you wake up every day and it's the same scenario.
Oh, okay.
Right? I know you like the movie a lot.
I figure you try to squeeze that in.
Plug Groundhog Day, great movie. No, but I think.
Do you know how many times he woke up
in the movie?
Yeah,
no, I
think it was like over 1,000, something like days.
Okay.
Yeah, I think someone did the math.
It got to a point where I almost wanted to stop watching it. Like fast forward a little bit here, it's getting kind of redundant. Mm-hmm. But no, I don't know whether it's social pressures, right? Social media. Here where we are, like Toronto, Ontario, Canada, there's a lot of pressure on folks to be successful, go to school, get an education.
At what age do you think someone should be obsessed about how much money they're going to make and how big their house is and what kind of car they're going to have? Should it be 14 or younger?
None of the above.
Exactly.
None of the above.
Should it be 20 years old? Because it used to be.
Yeah.
No, don't say yeah. That's wrong. No, okay. You're saying yeah. I'm putting words in your mouth, but maybe because you don't want people to be lackadaisical and like not being a contributing member of society.
I'm thinking forward and back. So at 20, you probably have an idea of what you want to do-ish with your life. You're probably in an education system beyond high school. Like you're pursuing something, and whatever you're pursuing, you're going to associate with a dollar amount. So you may not be obsessed with what you're going to make, but you probably have an idea of what you'd like to start out at and where that funnel can maybe take you.
Jonathan, do you pick your socks out the night before?
Yeah.
I knew it.
Somebody has to.
What do you think?
I think that some people are naturally inclined to be obsessed with that, and some people aren't. And I don't think an age makes that determination. I think for some people it starts really early. For some people it comes later in life. But I think either it comes or it doesn't.
So I guess what my point was, like, we have all these depressed kids.
Yeah.
And what are they depressed about? Their life? They're miserable? They're unhappy? They're not happy with where things are right now? I mean, you look at the school system, it's pretty dreary. I remember when I was in high school, it was a long time ago. That was sort of, I felt like I just caught the tail end of the wave of where kids like school. Like being in high school was a fun experience.
Absolutely, yeah.
And where I was like, I would just hear the stories of like, oh, last year we had like Spirit Week and we had all this fun. We had we played games with the teachers and they had this and they had that. And then for whatever reason, like, oh, it got canceled this year. I'm like, oh, well, I guess that is a bummer. And then like other things that were like, well, we used to do this, but we don't do that anymore. So it became like just school.
Yep.
And the teachers didn't look too happy. And the kids hated the teachers because if you don't have any camaraderie with your teacher, you hate them. So then you skip class, so you don't do your homework, whatever it is. So then there's like kind of like a greater disconnect. Like, I mean, and every so often you see these little videos of like the teacher doing something nice for their class or vice versa. Maybe there's misery in school because there's nothing fun.
Again, I really think it depends on the circumstance, because I know that this is quite commonly the case in high school. That is an amazing time for a lot of people. But
you had fun in high school.
Personally, I also know a lot of people in undergrad that is when they started to shine and come out of their shell, and different things that they were introduced to at different levels of education brought out things that maybe they resonated more with them, and they naturally enjoyed it more.
All right. We'll give the homecoming queen a break. Everything was roses on her subdivision. All right.
That is not true.
All right. Okay. I mean, I didn't mean it. Okay, depressed kids. Okay, Miss Sunshine over here. Why so glum?
Stress is a huge conversation. It's probably
that's why we were
the
talking
most
about it.
Common things
about being homecoming queen.
I hear every day. So it is a huge problem.
Stress is a huge problem.
Yeah.
All right, that's the quote for the podcast.
Oh.
Stress is a huge problem.
Or we can go with I don't have parasites. You pick.
Both are true. So.
I like parasites, yeah. I don't have parasites.
I don't have parasites.
There's your new topic.
And stress is a big problem. All right. I mean, we should end on a high.
What do you got?
Not much. Well, I'll just cut back to a part when it seemed like it was pretty good. Let's just block out that whole part. I didn't like that at all. I was trying to go somewhere with like helping kids with a suicide, and you're like, I shined in undergrad.
Not me. I saw other people shine in undergrad at all different levels.
I remember I shone once at the end of CCNM, naturopathic school.
But what do you think it is? Is it
Exactly.
like a disconnect with parents? Is it just like social pressure? Is it?
I think people don't have things that they look forward to, like acutely. Like a lot of people, they're like, oh, I'm going to go to med school. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to work hard and I will, eventually. And then they have something to look forward to.
But no one's participating in like sports, extracurricular activities.
I think that's a big decline. And I think it's harder for kids to be part of that because it seems like it's a cost thing and becomes an investment thing. So like, if I'm going to play hockey, it's hard for me to just play casual. I have to be like $3,000 in.
No, but I mean
and
like
practices
through the school. Can you play like a school team?
No, I mean, you got to make the team. Not everyone is an athlete.
There's intramurals. There's all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
So is it a lack of engagement with those things, or is it?
I think people are just sad. I think there's a bullying component. I think there's like a insecurity and a low self-esteem problem. And where sports can give that, I think sometimes kids just don't have motivation to like engage in it or the confidence. And at some point they become more reclusive.
So
and
is
they're
that
like,
a lack of mentorship?
Probably. I think that's a huge element. I mean,
And
maybe
then-
that's what leading into like what I was talking about with the teachers. Like
Yeah.
if you don't get along with your teachers, then there's a whole avenue of people you don't look up to now. Name a male role model?
Like me personally?
You're not mine. I mean, you might be mine, but I'm saying like name one in like like publicly, a public figure, a male role model. Don't say LeBron James.
I don't watch basketball. Sidney Crosby.
He's your role model?
Not mine, but he could be somebody's.
Who?
Every kid that comes in the NHL.
Okay, kid
is
playing
like
hockey.
Sidney
if you don't play
Crosby.
hockey, do you care about Sidney Crosby?
No.
All
Probably
right,
don't.
then how many kids don't play hockey? Most of them.
Fair enough.
Doug Ford.
No. That's what?
I don't know.
You can edit that out. Can we go back?
Olivia Chow.
Oh boy. I thought you said male role model.
All right, sorry. Yeah, it's a male. Okay, name a female role model. Beyonce.
Someone in your family. So it could be your father or your mother, or even a sibling.
Name a female role model.
Yeah, I would
my
say
You want a
my-
celebrity.
Yeah,
A
I mean,
celebrity?
someone that like a lot of people look up to.
So if you're excluding sports, it's going to be a musician or someone who does something else in that space. But I don't follow music, so.
All right.
No.
So I guess my idea is like people are having a hard time knowing who to look for, like who to look up to, who to model themselves after. Because unless you're like a 6'4" super athlete, how do you relate to?
So who was your role model growing up, or at a stage in your life?
I'm trying to not make a joke. There's probably like at different phases, like an uncle or a cousin. I looked up someone older. I said
family
female.
member.
You're holding
A
us to a higher
family
standard. So
member.
who's the like?
But I'm saying like for me, like because when I was younger,
There's no
athletes.
judgments. It's okay.
It's okay. I liked Hulk Hogan,
Okay.
but I was like in the 80s when
Okay.
he wasn't like a goof.
How he is now.
I mean, like I don't look like I actually had this idea. There was a time when I'm like, if I had to like have like dinner with a bunch of famous people or people I looked up, who would I pick?
Yeah.
And they're all like people I would not want to even look at now. I can't say their names because then I would be canceled or something.
Sure.
All right, Jonathan, you're mine.
Perfect.
Starting now.
I will sleep well tonight.
Leah, I'm yours. And I think that's where we'll stop.